If you have a question, chat us or raise your hand via the Zoom Zoom platform. We'll get to you. If for some reason we don't get to you during the call, I'll email you. I've had to do that when I fly solo sometimes. So or consider that. But anyways, we will get your questions answered. Without further ado, Dan is the Assistant Executive Director for the New Jersey Council on Compulsive Gambling. He graduated from the College of New Jersey with a BS in Finance and concentration in economics. He holds his MS in psychology from California Coast University. He's spoken at a dozen events around the country with internet and mobile device gambling, as well as emerging trends in sports gambling. And whether Dan's speaking on prevention strategies, treatment resources, responsible gaming, or recovery resources, he talks and discusses the concept of gambling, addiction switching, co-occurring disorders and behaviors associated with this nasty and devastating addiction. And I will say this too, Dan, I've heard Dan talk, I think Dan, it was in North Carolina when you talked at the sports summit. I do know you have a love of sports. So Dan's very resourceful and great in this area. And I really look forward to what you have to say today, Dan. And without further ado, it's yours, man.
Great. Thanks, Robbie. Always just great to be a part of a call and be with folks from around the country, especially during these times when we find new ways to receive information and to share information and to learn. Wonderful introduction. I always learn something new, and something, Robbie, that you said that really resonates. Talked about interpersonal violence and interpersonal relationships. And even during COVID, in the last 3 days, I've received 2 phone calls from loved ones who live with a problem gambler. And because of the lack of accessibility to sports betting, the hostility in the household has been at a high. And it has led to more altercations, whether it be physical in one case or a lot of verbal and emotional, primarily in the other case. No physical, but more verbal and emotional abuse. It really leads to a lot of interpersonal violence in many different ways. And gambling is one of those where when we screen for addiction, it's easy to screen for substance use disorder. It's easy to take a look at nicotine dependency, because these are things we put in our bodies. There's positive samples that can be generated. Gambling is that hidden addiction. It's that hidden nature of that disease. It's the one when a cop shows up at the door, if they don't see drug paraphernalia, they'll just think that a couple was just arguing, but it could be over a gambling dispute. We've seen that in New Jersey, and we're trying to affect and impact change around how cops will approach a domestic violence or a domestic dispute, to ask the question if there's some gambling going on in the home. And if someone even mentions it, that it should be pursued further, or at least considered and included in the police report, so that it can warrant consideration as it moves through the legal process or the corrections process in some cases, because some folks have gone to prison, as we know, over their gambling. So welcome all from sunny New Jersey. We have a nice day. I will get started. We have a lot to talk about, and anyone that has heard me speak, I'm not super concerned with getting through all my slides. I have a lot of content in here. They're all available. If you like them, if you want them, I'm always happy to share a PDF version of it. You can ask me directly. You can ask Robbie directly. Happy to give you the information. I love sharing information to make sure that people are up to date on some of the emerging trends. And one of the biggest emerging trends we see, although not right now, is the world of sports gambling. Although last night, baseball season started. And for those of you that were up at 1 a.m. or maybe even later, Korean Baseball League started. Last night was opening day. So there is sports to watch again on TV. I think ESPN will be covering these at the midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. hours. So for baseball enthusiasts, baseball season has started. But we want to take a look at sports betting. We want to do it a couple different ways, and we're going to do it over the next 2 webinars. Today we're going to take a look at fantasy sports contests, esports, and sports betting. All have sports in the title. And yes, we are going to cover sports betting on the May 15th, but it's also going to come at it from a slightly different perspective. It's also going to encapsulate internet gambling, casino gambling, skill-based gambling. And we're going to talk more about the action component of gambling in that one. So for today, we're going to focus primarily on fantasy sports, esports, and sports betting. There'll be some questions along the way just to make sure we're all paying attention. But let's first understand that gambling is not about the money. And for those on the call today, I'm excited to see that we had over 75 people, and it was going up right before I started. If you treat clients and you're asking someone about the money or monetary aspect or the financial aspect of the gambling only, you're missing the boat. Gambling's not about the money, it's about the action. Gambling's about generating the dopamine. It's about that hope. Gambling is about the hook, which is the uncertainty. And every so often, a person wins when they gamble. For anyone on this webinar who has gambled, you know that every so often you're going to win. And it feels good. So when you have a potential gain or you're anticipating a win, the dopamine is being produced in your brain, in your body. It's flowing, right? However, the problem and the nature of gambling, what makes it so hard to give up, is that we know we're going to win every so often. That's the hook. The problem is we don't know how often, how much, or when it will happen next. Those three elements is what makes gambling so difficult to give up. Yeah, Dr. Rugel will be on in a relatively short period of time, within the next 10 days or so, 2 weeks. And one thing she always said that stuck out in my mind: gambling has the power to change a person's life. Gambling is the one thing that can take someone from poverty, that can make somebody who felt that they were nothing, can turn them into something in their own mind. Gambling has that power, but it also has the power to slowly destroy an individual, to destroy families, right? It's that intermittent reinforcement that every so often I win is what keeps me hooked to think that something better is just around the corner, okay? So gambling is not about the money. It's about, how do I see myself? What's my perception? What's my self-worth? What's my ego? This is my identity. It's not just about the money. The definition of gambling is risking something of value to win something of value where there's uncertainty and the outcome is unknown. It doesn't say risking money to win money. It's risking something of value. And what's of value to me might be different than what's of value to you. So let's take a look at the different types of gamblers. 800 Gambler is neutral on gambling. I want to always say that first. We are neither for nor against gambling. We are neutral. Our mission of our agency as a nonprofit in the state of New Jersey is to help the person who has developed the problem and also the loved ones and the family members of the problem or disordered gambler. You see, we don't have an opinion on whether gambling's good or bad. We just say we want resources and funding available to provide treatment services for those that need it, and also for those who are the loved ones of the person who's gambling. So over 90% of Americans can gamble normally. And that's occasionally. There's limits involved. They're considered social gamblers. And this is a majority of the population. Over 9 out of every 10. You could almost argue that if you had 100 people in a room, it might be 91 or 92 people will be able to gamble within limits, right? And then as you go through the different types of gamblers, they're categorized many different ways. This is just one way. A serious gambler is someone who still has limits, but it becomes their hobby. You know, some people might like to go out and make sure they run or exercise 5 days a week. This individual will make sure they want to get some gambling time in, but it's not creating problems in their life. They're not taking money from expenses that money would otherwise be used to pay for. And so it's a hobby. You start going down into the world of professional gambling, ones we can watch on TV, ones that kids or adults will idolize and want to be like, the poker players, professional handicappers in sports. There's websites promoting that they have the inside edge, right? I'm a professional, follow me, pay for my picks. The concern is, at times, we don't know where they toe the line between being a professional and starting it to have it develop a problem. Problem gambler is someone where their gambling is starting to create a problem in various areas of their life. Could be financial, could be relational, social, emotional, job, school, could be any areas, right? So we're starting to see their gambling create problems. They might be preoccupied. They might start chasing their losses, anger, fights, disagreements. It's just starting to weigh on the individual. A disordered gambler is the clinical diagnosis per the DSM-5. Take a step back. In 2013, the diagnostic manual, which is the Bible for psychological illnesses and diseases within the United States and disorders in the United States, elevated gambling from compulsive gambling, as it was known in DSM-4, to disordered gambling. Disordered gambling is the only non-substance related addictive disorder in the DSM. So when you think about the elevation of gambling to now be on par with almost a substance like disorder, that was huge in the world of treatment for the problem gambler. They can now have a diagnostic code attached to their condition. They had criteria. There was 9 criteria, and if you met at least 4, you were considered a disordered gambler. Now, under disordered gambling, that comes on a spectrum. So you're considered mild if you answer yes to 4 or 5. You're considered moderate if it's 6 or 7, and it's severe if it's 8 or 9. So there's now a spectrum and a way to diagnose and start categorizing and treating someone with a gambling disorder. Antisocial gambler is one, as we think about gambling to manipulate others, disregarding the rules. They tend to be called the personality gamblers, and they tend to have higher rates of illegal activity. So gambling is a hidden addiction. Hard to diagnose. It's hard to see. You can't look at someone and say, yes, I can tell you're gambling because I can smell it on your breath, or I can see track marks on your arm. You can't. It's hidden. And it's also hard to overcome because the gambler believes that he or she will overcome it on the next win, the next spin of the dice, or for today's purposes, the outcome of the next sporting event. So what are some reasons that a person might start to develop problem or disordered gambling? Well, people gamble just like people drink or do drugs. They look to escape stress. It's a coping mechanism for people. It's a form of entertainment. But when you start doing the same thing over and over again, and you start to produce dopamine and it makes you feel better, it becomes your coping mechanism. Why wouldn't you want to do it more? I speak to older adults. Pre-COVID, we would do in-person workshops in older adult communities, and we would talk about responsible gambling and the dangers of disordered gambling and public health, et cetera. And one woman had raised her hand and said she loved playing bingo. And she loved playing bingo because whenever she played bingo, the arthritis in her hands, she didn't feel the pain. She did not feel the pain from the arthritis in her hands. When the bingo board was in front of her, her hands would move painlessly and effortlessly. But within a half hour of the bingo game being done, her hands hurt once again. So she would always ask, when can I play bingo again? When is the next round of bingo? She was constantly looking for that escape from her pain. For her, gambling took her out of a negative state, not a negative mood state per se, although it was attached to the negative pain state that she felt, the negative physical pain state in her hands. Other reasons that people have disordered gambling, to deal with depression and anxiety. But does the gambling result in depression and anxiety for some? Yes. Could someone suffer from depression and anxiety and then turn to gambling to alleviate some of that? Yes. So it's the chicken and the egg. We don't know. In some cases, gambling can exacerbate a condition. It can also be a relief from an existing condition. Case by case, person by person, we have to deal with the issues. Other areas where we cite disordered gambling is when somebody starts early. 2 of the biggest risk factors for developing a problem, whether it's for drugs, alcohol, gambling, would be age of onset and not experiencing the negatives. So when you have say, for example, a 12-year-old who wins maybe a lot of money gambling, that's an early onset and they had a big win. But let's think about it in the context of the non-traditional big win. What about that same 12-year-old who might go to the racetrack or to a sporting event and it has a chance to bond with his father, with her mother, right? So all of a sudden, the big win, if you use air quotes, the big win early could be that emotional connection, the bonding experience that a child remembers from bonding with their parent or loved one over some gambling. That could be something that's tucked away. And that can be brought back up and recalled to say, hey, this gambling was always positive. I had positive memories of this because it allowed me to connect with my family. You see, it doesn't always have to be about the money. The big win can come in many different forms. And then we also have to be aware of risk factors. If someone's gambling to deal with trauma, or if there's a number of adverse childhood experiences where the negatives outweigh the positives, if there's also co-occurring substance use, right? We know that over 60% of gamblers also have an alcohol use disorder, and over 60% also have a nicotine dependency. So there's a lot of connected behaviors that go on: gambling and drinking, gambling and smoking, gambling, drinking, and smoking. There's a lot of connected behaviors that we have to be aware of. So if you're treating someone for any of those, Doesn't it make sense to ask questions about someone's gambling habits? I would say yes. We have to treat the whole person, has to be a holistic approach, so we have to ask the right questions. So, Robbie, I'll turn it back over to you for polling question number 1.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Okay, let's look at poll question number 1, which asks, the following were identified as types of gamblers. Is it A, social? Is it B, professional? Is it C, disordered? Or is it D, all the above? The following were identified as types of gamblers. Was it A, social? Was it B, professional? Was it C, disorder? Or is it D, all the above? And we're approaching 70% now.
I'm not allowed to vote, Robbie. That's too bad.
Well, you got an in, you got.
I think so.
You're teaching it right.
If I get it wrong, I'm in trouble.
85% voted. We'll go maybe 10 more seconds. I think we can get to 90 anyways. Okay. The answer is D, all the above. And then we got 89%. Got it correct, Dan.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that.
Awesome.
Thank you. So let's get started here with the fantasy sports. So today I want to talk about a few different types of sports. We want to talk about fantasy sports, esports, and traditional sports betting, which isn't so traditional any longer. For those of you who are not familiar, we're going to take a look at fantasy sports. DraftKings and FanDuel are the two most well-known companies participating in this space. And when you think about fantasy sports, it has changed because what you need for a fantasy sports contest traditionally is a sport to play. But in the absence of sports since COVID, the DraftKings and the FanDuels of the world have been extremely creative. And so in the top right of this slide, you see the symbol for Survivor, 40th year, Winners at War. FanDuel has been offering a fantasy sports contest for the past several weeks where you can pick different members of the participants in Survivor. And based upon how they perform on the show, you can earn points. And you assemble a team, a roster of Survivor members, and based on the number of points you collect from those members, you can win cash prizes. Now, what's interesting is you don't have to pay to enter this contest. This is a free contest. But what FanDuel is doing is kind of exposing to people and say, here you go, give this a try. It's free. There's no risk, but you can win money for our website. So what they're trying to do is keep people engaged at a time when sports, traditional forms of sports, are at a pause. And now you can earn points and win money and prizes playing Survivor. And it's funny because I was looking at the website. One of the things you earn points for, a person wins a token, a fire token. A person wins a challenge, you earn points. But if a person cries, you lose points. So not only is this for Survivor, but this is also for Bachelor, which was on last night. They have a fantasy contest for Bachelor. They have the cooking shows have a fantasy contest. Then you have a whole host of other fantasy contests. League of Legends, video game tournaments, you can have fantasy contests. So the nature of a fantasy contest is also known as a rotisserie or a roto contest. And whether it's football, baseball, or Survivor, the essence is you assemble an imaginary team using real players. So like I said, in Survivor, you're using the real cast members of Survivor who are participating on that TV show, and they now join your imaginary team. Points are earned based upon the statistical performance of those players. I mentioned Survivor. You're not scoring a touchdown. There's no traditional forms of scoring. So FanDuel came up with areas that would generate points. And like I said, winning a contest, winning an immunity idol. If anyone watches Survivor, you'll know what I'm talking about. Those generate points. But being voted off the island or losing, that takes away points. So it's an amazing time. It shows the creativity. I have my background in finance and economics, and I always appreciate when Robbie says it the way that I do, because having worked on Wall Street, I always called it finance, not finance. And, so I can understand from a business perspective the need to retain a customer base at a time when a majority of sports gamblers and fantasy players are moving back to the online gambling world of poker, blackjack, slot machines, using internet-based gambling machines. In New Jersey, those are all legal. We've had internet gambling since 2013 in New Jersey. So our gambling may not be hit as much or as badly as, say, another state that does not have internet forms of gambling or legally can't do it. So fantasy sports contests retain customer base. Here's an example for those of you who are still not clear on what fantasy sports might be. You earn points based upon, this is a football scoring example. So if your quarterback throws a touchdown, you would earn 6 points for your team. If your kicker, the kicker that you've drafted for your team, kicks a field goal, you earn 3 points. And you can see, quarterback throws an interception, you lose 3 points. So there's basically a whole host of scoring. It's all automated. It's done online. Years ago, before the internet, this was done manually with pencil and paper. Being a numbers person, I used to love this. But people who don't like numbers or calculating scoring, it was a nightmare. So this organically went to the internet where sites will do this for you. So when you think about daily fantasy sports, though, let's think about the word daily, right? A fantasy sports contest can span a period of time. It can span a week, a month, a whole sports season. That would be a traditional fantasy sports league where it covers an extended period of time. What DraftKings and FanDuel have done, they've taken that season-long concept spread over several months, and they've accelerated it. And it now becomes a daily activity. If you just think about intuitively, when you take something that is stretched out over several months and you accelerate it into a daily cycle, your reward schedule has now been moved, accelerated forward. Instead of receiving a reward if you win after 4 months and having to patiently wait for that reward, you're now rewarded on a daily basis. From a reward schedule perspective, you've accelerated that because it takes place over shorter periods of time. You're rewarded more frequently, which means that you're reinforcing the behavior. It means that you're reinforcing the neural pathway, and you're also reinforcing the learning experience every time the dopamine is released. Because what we know about dopamine is that it anchors our learning, it makes us feel good, and it blocks pain. So if I'm having some measure of success or I'm winning small amounts of prizes in these contests, I'm now experiencing that on a more frequent or regular schedule. I'm at a higher likelihood to start doing this more often, and over time can start to feel almost as if I need to do this thing on a daily basis. Doesn't apply to everyone, but you can see how when you accelerate something to a daily basis. I'll give an example. For any of you that have children that are on this webinar, I have twins that are 15. My twins got their first iPhone 5 years ago when they were 10. And the reason they got it when they were 10 is because 4 years ago when they were 11, because they were entering middle school and there was some walking that they had to do. So my ex-wife and I decided at the time when they go to middle school is when they will get their iPhone for safety reasons, primarily. And I remember having a conversation with them when they were in 6th grade. And my daughter and my son, twin boy, one girl, both said, we're only going to stay on our phone for an hour. We're just going to stay for an hour a day. We're going to be very responsible. We don't want to use it too much. And early on, they were great with that. They were fine if there was no Tuesday tech day, took the phone away. But over time, and as the years go on, as they get older and more of their friends have the phone, that 1 hour a day turned to 2 hours a day, turned to 3 hours a day, 5 hours a day. Now, 15, freshmen in high school, and I'm sure others can relate to this, there's a constant conversation. At times, there's a little bit of a battle, but still being the parents, we typically will win that battle, not through force often, but through conversation and relationship building. I can just identify when they are exceeding their use on their phone because other areas also start to fall apart. Grades start to decline, right? But they're looking at their phone because they've accelerated the use. They're getting more of a dopamine rush through social media, through games that they play on their phone, And where something was infrequent a few years ago, now that it's frequent, it's a harder conversation. It's harder to get somebody away from it. They almost feel as if automatically they need to pick up their phone and look at it. And adults are the same way. Sometimes we just pick up our phone and look at it, and there's really nothing we're looking for. We do it out of habit. And so we have to be careful that anything that we take that had intermittent or a lag reward schedule, and we start reinforcing it on a more regular basis, that can lead to problematic behavior and activity. So what's the relationship between fantasy sports and gambling? In New Jersey, the law says fantasy sports contests are not gambling. Half the states say it is, half the states say it isn't. What does it look like? Well, traditionally, if you want to enter a fantasy sports contest, most of the time, you have to risk something of value in order to try to win something of value, and the outcome is uncertain. To me, that fits the definition of gambling. And more importantly, besides whether, we can get into an argument whether it is or not, but more importantly, the behaviors can start to mimic gambling. So all of a sudden, a person can call up our 800 Gambler helpline and say, I've lost $500 this past weekend playing fantasy sports, but it's not, I'm told it's not gambling, so what's my problem? Well, we don't want to always identify whether it's gambling or not. We've just identified, though, an area where a person's life is becoming unmanageable, and that's more important than arguing over whether something's gambling or not. You see, alcohol is legal, but people can have a problem with that. So I'm not really interested in getting involved in a conversation whether it was legal or illegal. I want to get that person the help and the support that they need. That's more important at that moment. So fantasy sports contests almost look like gambling. You have big payouts. You can reinforce that near miss like a slot machine. In a fantasy sports contest, you can almost win a contest, but you lose. The first instinct is, I want to do this again. I was so close to winning. Let me do it again. That's the same concept you get from standing in front of a slot machine when you almost hit a big payout and you miss. So it's reinforcing that reward center. New Jersey did a study in 2018. They took a look at residents, and what they wanted to understand is identify the nature, frequency, and preference of gambling behaviors among fantasy players. And what they typically found was that daily fantasy players, people who play daily fantasy sports, tend to also participate in a higher number of gambling activities. They do so more frequently. They tend to be male, which tend to be your skill-based gamblers, so that fits. They tend to have higher reports of suicidal ideations, not completed attempts, but ideations. And also what was interesting was they tended to be Hispanic and single. That tended to be an elevated predictor level. That was one area that I was curious about. I haven't received feedback on that because I did inquire, but I haven't received any type of answer. Being of Hispanic descent was interesting to me. Don't know if that was the sample size. I'm not really sure, but that one stood out to me. So now let's talk about esports. We've covered fantasy sports. Now let's talk about esports. And what you see before you in this screen are big arenas full of people. So that looks strange because we don't have big arenas full of people right now, nor will we in the near future. But B, what are they watching? Who are these men in the top right sitting in chairs? Those are competitive video gamers, and they are doing something. They're part of a team, and that team is competing in a contest that's called an esports contest, electronic sports. And what esports is, it's professional video gaming in real time. It's professional video gaming in real time. There are games that require teams. So these are not people that just sit in their basement and just play on their Xbox for 6 or 8 or 10 hours per day with no purpose, right? These are people who get together. Each has a specific role. They're on a team, and they're working towards a common goal of winning the round, winning the board, beating another team. And they're doing this in real time. And in these esports contests, these are professional video gamers at professional events. Top left that you see on your screen, that's the Staples Center. You're fitting 15,000 people, if not more, into an arena to cheer on their favorite video game team. During COVID, video gaming has taken off, not just from kids at home playing more hours, but in terms of contests and sports. It's live streamed on various websites like Twitch and Mixer. Those are two that you may not be familiar with, but if you have kids, they're familiar with Twitch and Mixer. And this is where you can see other people playing video games. What's interesting is when you look at kids who play video games, when they're not playing video games, they like to watch other people play video games. That's how they consume. A recent statistic came out and said that the biggest consumer of video game is not the under 18 age bracket. It's the 18 to 35 age bracket. So where we might think it's the under 18 adolescent and teen, it's really not. It's 18 to 35 is what we're seeing higher participation rates. So esports, a global industry, huge audience, big revenue. And again, it's competitive video gaming in real time. It's teamwork, it's collaboration. But gaming, it also provides an outlet. It's an alternative. Perhaps, as I've listened to some interviews, some of these people were not your traditional athletes in the traditional setting. They weren't the biggest, the strongest. They couldn't get on the football field or play baseball or play soccer. They weren't the fastest and couldn't run track, but they had a different skill that they honed over time. That's why esports is being considered to become an Olympic sport. Wouldn't that be something? The IOC is looking at adding video gaming as an Olympic medal event. It's fascinating. We know that colleges offer scholarships. We know high schools have esports teams. Because if you think about it, if you're going to make something an Olympic medal event, well, then how young do you have to start training in order to get good enough to go to the Olympics in any sport? You think of gymnastics, ice skating, figure skating, whatever it is, oftentimes you have to start very young. Video gaming is no different. So we're seeing competitive video game teams starting to form at the high school level, at the middle school level. And it's not always bad, it's just different, right? It's just different. It's a new phenomenon, it's a new culture. So college and universities offer scholarships. There's degrees in esports management. It's a cultural phenomenon. But what have we seen during COVID-19? Well, we know March 11th, if we look backwards now, it's been almost 2 months when the NBA suspended the rest of the season after Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz tested positive. I was watching ESPN. I was watching the basketball game that night, and they pulled everyone off the court. It was fascinating. And then after that, that was it. No more basketball. And from there, each sport started shutting down. UFC had a match in Brazil, was one of the last contests that they had, and that was it, one by one. Okay, even the Olympics are pushed back to 2021. But with no sports to consume, no traditional sports to consume, the American public gets hungry. So what have they been live streaming? Well, on TV the other night, I was watching a video game called MLB 2K, whatever it is, for PlayStation, and they're now playing video games on TV. And you can watch Major League Baseball players playing video games against each other in the sport in which they normally play, baseball. In basketball, they're simulating games. Football is simulating video games that you can watch on the internet or on TV. Even the Kentucky Derby is coming up, I believe, this weekend, or maybe it was last weekend. They were going to simulate the race. It's all simulation. That's what's now making it to TV. It's totally different, something you would never have expected, but it gets the public to watch. The United States is so sports hungry. Look at the graphics. What you see on the left is that's a video game from a NASCAR race. Top right is a soccer game, and bottom right is the NBA 2K game. And you can watch these games, and in some cases, going back to fantasy sports, you can draft a fantasy team based on the video game players, and then based on how they do during the game, you earn points. It's really a strange, crazy time. But it's really something we have to embrace, as these are all alternatives that are out there for people to still get their fill or their fix for sports where they otherwise could not. Robbie, I'll turn it over for polling question number 2.
Great stuff, Dan. Thank you very much. And thank you for putting in all the COVID-19 developments. That's fascinating, and I'm sure everybody on the call appreciates it. So good stuff, man. I usually at night while I'm launching this, my wife is fascinated with all this. But one thing I probably won't share with her is the Bachelor fantasy thing. We'll probably have a problem in the household. Okay. Poll question number 2. Dan, describe esports as. Is it A, a competitive video gaming in real time? Or is it B, a type of game you can buy in a store? Is it C, both A and B? Or is it D, neither A or B? Esports was just described as A, a competitive video gaming or professional video gaming in real time? Or is it B, a type of game you can buy in a store? Is it C, both A and B? Or is it D, neither A or B?
Robbie, I'd be a terrible professor. I mean, I just lob these up for people to hit them out of the park
You're
right there.
fine.
See, there's a sports reference.
Okay, we're getting to around 80%. 85%, maybe a couple more seconds. We're at 88%. We'll see if we can get it 90%. But the answer is A, competitive video gaming in real time.
Very good. Very good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and just something else that just dawned on me as I was thinking this through with, again, the nature of fantasy sports, of making predictions on things that will happen. We've even seen things about the virus, coronavirus. And it's been in some of the illegal offshore gambling sites, which is where you'll primarily find this. They were having, you could make wagers on anything. Whether the Prime Minister of Canada was going to recover when he had coronavirus or if he was going to die. The number of new cases that will be reported in a particular state or country. And then other things, such as comparing the temperature in Tempe, Arizona to the temperature in Tampa, Florida. Which one will be higher at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, May 6th? I mean, it's unbelievable the number of options that a person can have to risk money on, to participate in an activity. You know, some of the first sports that are now back are Korean baseball, which I mentioned was on last night. Belarusian soccer has been going on for a while. Also, ping pong has been on. So there are sports, and unfortunately, our 800 Gambler helpline, even though the helpline calls have not been coming through as much as they were in the past, we still receive phone calls, and the phone calls we get are from people who struggle with any of the sports that I just mentioned, or the fantasy sports, or video game time spent on video games. And in the next webinar on the 15th, we'll talk about within video games, kids that play video games, there's gambling mechanics in those video games that you can get used to spending money, and you can try to win things of value in video games that you may not be aware of. And they can be in the form of loot boxes or prize crates, where it almost looks like you're opening up this beautiful treasure chest. And inside that treasure chest, there's something of value. And then you can take that valuable digital item and you can try to trade it with your friends or sell it on a third-party site. That starts to become problematic for some. And kids will spend a lot of money chasing an item that they want. And that's through microtransactions. I'll even share one other quick example before we get to the last section here, because I do have the time for it. We received an 800 Gambler call 6 months ago from the husband. The wife was not gambling, but she had lost, or she had spent, $25,000 in the past year on the Wheel of Fortune game on her phone. Now, I have the Family Feud game on my phone, and I enjoy playing that periodically. And they're always trying to get you to spend money in those games. That's a free game, but it gives you the opportunity to spend money. You can get more turns. For Wheel of Fortune, you might get more spins. It gives you the opportunity to spend money, and that's called microtransactions, the opportunity to spend money within a game.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
I'm sorry to break in here, but my screen is stuck as well. I'm just seeing the poll question. Oh, there we are.
Yep. Yeah, I had not switched.
No, it's
sorry.
all right.
I did not switch. I got so into talking, I forgot to switch the screen.
No, I was listening to it, and then my colleague, actually, Allison, I think you know Allison, our prevention coordinator, said, "Hey, we can't see a screen, but go ahead." Thank you.
That's great, Allison.
Right.
I'm glad Allison's here, and I think Ashley might be there too. So it's always good to hear from Allison and Ashley. Shout out to them. They're excellent. They're awesome. They do a great job too. So the $25,000 spending money on a video game, and it's not gambling. And the reason she was spending that money is because she had 3 children. The first child overdosed and died about 5 years prior. Second child had just gone off to college, and the last child had recently overdosed and died. She lost 2 of her 3 kids to overdose. And having that other child who's away at college, she was just hurting. She never dealt with that deep pain. And she just used the gaming and the spending of money on the games to just kind of escape life. And, that's the thing in the May 15th webinar we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about free to play and freemium, because it doesn't just apply to youth. We're going to talk about gaming as an escape. So when we're talking about gambling and gaming, it offers a lot of positives. It does offer social connection. It offers measurable growth. It can give purpose and meaning to somebody, but it also could come at a price if you're using it to escape a problem that you don't know how to deal with, or if you're using it instead of coping or addressing the problem. We need to, that's why any type of treatment, any type of therapeutic intervention should always include, when the time is right, um, life skills, coping mechanisms. We have to let people build these skills and put these tools in their tool belt so that they know how to deal with the curveballs of life when they come our way. And lastly, with gaming, what we typically find, a lot of esports players, when they started playing video games, one of the common thread, if you interview some of the better video game players right now in the world, for them, gaming is a safe place. It's a safe place to play. It was a safe place to experiment, a safe place to fail. And they got better over time just because they were able to fail time and time again and learn from their mistakes. And that always stuck out to me. Sometimes in life, our kids get afraid to fail. They're afraid to experiment. They need a safe place. Kids need a safe place. But we have to nurture that and let them know it's okay to learn from those mistakes. And not be, and I know I've been guilty of this myself, not try to solve the problem for them, but let them run into the problem and kind of work with them, partner in their success going forward, as opposed to shielding them or preventing them from finding the right way to succeed, right? So that's when we look at the potential risks with gaming. Can lead to problem gambling. It is a concern with youth with how much time, and especially if they're starting to spend money on games at a young age. Spending money on games at a young age normalizes the experience. So now when they turn 21 and they're in a casino, they're used to spending money on games. And if you take away the fourth point here, this is the only thing you take from this slide, always remember, the brain develops the gas pedal faster than the braking system. Because the way the brain develops, mid-20s roughly, male, female, slight difference in years, but let's just say mid-20s, assuming no prior substance use or no prior brain injury, the prefrontal cortex will be the last part that develops, which is the decision-making, and therefore, that's the braking system. So kids want to go, 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 and our job as parents and caregivers and whatever role we play is to say, whoa, 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 slow down. So the gas pedal always develops faster than the braking system. Let's finish the last 12 minutes or so talking about sports betting. Sports betting is fascinating to me because before we go to the helpline, prior to the advent of the U.S. authorizing and allowing states to decide if they want to allow sports betting, traditionally, sports betting in the United States has always been picking the outcome of a game. I'll take the Giants, Robbie takes the Patriots. And when the Giants beat the Patriots in a Super Bowl, I win my money and the Patriots lose and Robbie loses his money. Sorry, Robbie, I had to do that. Okay. So in the Super Bowls, when you started seeing elements of what will the coin toss be, how long will the national anthem be, and you can bet on different elements within a game. But over the last couple of years, we've started to see sports betting transition. And sports betting is starting to change, and that's what I'm going to talk about here. Before I do that, I just want to show you a chart, and this is important. If you look at this chart, a couple things stand out. This is our 800 gambler helpline calls. And what I did is, since the legalization of sports betting in New Jersey, it was June of 2018. So I took the first full month, which started in July of 18, and I tracked it through February of 20. And we took a look at handle, which is how much money, just pure dollars that are wagered on sports each month. Those are the red bars, okay? And you can see that that's upward sloping to the right. It's cyclical, it's seasonal, okay? Because it depends on the sport, it depends on the time of year of and again, sports gambling is just growing during this time. But then the line is the percentage of calls that we get where the person indicates that sports gambling is their primary problem. So if we have someone who calls us and says, I have a gambling problem, we say, okay, what type of gambling? They say, well, it's sports betting. That's a primary problem. And we talk to them about that. What you can see is that as the handle increases over time, generally speaking, the percentage of our calls where sports gambling is the primary issue, that's also been increasing over time. And this is what I want to caution. Because when you bring sports gambling to a state, and you have internet, because our state has internet gambling, so over 85% of all sports bets are done on mobile devices. The person has a bookie in their back pocket 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can jump on an app, you can hit a few buttons, and you've got your bet placed. So as handle increases, as more money is being wagered, we've noticed an uptick in our helpline calls. This is why we advocate, we urge, and we work with other states to help them understand what might be coming their way, what are some of the resources that we have in our state, and what are some of the programs and prevention measures that we have that we've been working with schools and colleges and clinics, methadone clinics, opioid clinics, and the prison system. We have a robust program for prevention, and we're always happy to share that with anyone who asks. So what are some of the top 3 structural considerations for online sports betting? 1, the platform, 2, in-play, and 3, cash out. So the device or platform is pretty straightforward. As I just mentioned, over 85% of all wagers in New Jersey are done online. And that's ease of access. That's ease of use. Couple buttons, people are familiar. This is geared towards, it doesn't have to be geared towards the tech-savvy person, but we tend to find the 21 to 35 age demographic placing more bets online. They're not concerned about going into a brick and mortar location. What the benefit also of online is that you get your real-time streaming information right in front of you. You know if a bet is winning or losing real time. Watching the game, you can see the line. You can make any number of bets within a game. Yet it's also subtle. It's hidden. It's non-stigmatizing. I don't have pieces of paper all over with all my bet slips. It's on my phone. It's all concealed on my phone in an app, tucked away, secure, and safe. But what we started to see the world of sports betting change is in something called live betting. Live betting has a lot of potential to be more harmful than other forms of gambling because of its structure. The concept of live betting means that if I'm watching a baseball game, because it's baseball season now, I theoretically can bet not just on the game itself, but I can bet pitch by pitch. I can bet if the next pitch will be a ball, a strike, if there'll be a base hit, an out, a pop out, a ground out. I have so much potential, so many different opportunities to wager. If I'm watching a soccer match, traditional soccer, football as I call it in the UK, soccer here, some of the bet options might be in the next 90 seconds, will there be a goal? And you can bet yes or no, and you can either win or lose money. And there's real-time odds that flash before your eyes. Sports betting has become more about the in-game betting than it has become about the outcome of the game. In the UK, in-play betting has been popular for well over a decade. The UK gambler is not concerned about the outcome of the game at all. They're more concerned about finding an opportunity during the game to bet on. And so it makes a person more engaged with the game. It gives the opportunity to put a large number of bets throughout the game instead of just one bet on the outcome. And also the person who's betting with in-play betting, they have a high fear of missing out. Because if you're watching a game and you're betting pitch by pitch, you don't want to miss the next pitch because that could be the one that you would have won some money on. So all of a sudden, this is crucial in not just the acquisition, but also the maintenance of an addiction. And as you do online in-play sports betting more and more, you're reinforcing that neural pathway. What did we talk about earlier with the reward schedule? When you think about season-long fantasy and you shrink it down to daily, you've shortened that time for the reward. What about even shortening it even more? Betting during a game instead of waiting for the game to be done. You've just shrunk down that reward schedule. Do you see what's happening in terms of technological advancement and how gambling is changing? The reward schedule is being shrunk down to have the opportunity to reinforce it more frequently. That, for some people, can be lethal in the world of developing a gambling disorder. New Jersey has a 6.2% disordered gambling rate. The national average is 2%. We're 3 times the national average. When you have internet gambling and you have in-play sports betting and you have those opportunities for some people, not all, it can really create a problem, okay? So let's go to the last point, the cash out feature. So we've talked about internet gambling, we've talked about betting during a game, in play, but what about an early cash out? So here's 2 bet slips on a screen, okay? Now, what a cash out feature does is it allows you, quite simply, to close out your bet while the game is still going on or before the event has been completed. So look to the slip on the right. Bet slip number 1 in red. It says from September 16th at 3:37 p.m., okay, the person wagered $5 to try to win $8.75. Now, this sporting event started at 3 o'clock. This was a soccer match, English Premier League. It was Aston Villa versus West Ham. The person now is 37 minutes into the match. He or she wagered $5. The website, and this might be FanDuel, is offering this individual $4.48 to close out their bet right now. That's what the cash out, $4.48. You see it right there. So this individual can choose if they want to let their bet stay open, they can still win money, or if they're not comfortable with the way the game is going, they can close out their bet now and they would take a little bit of a loss. They'd get $4.48 back. That's what early cash out allows you to do. That's one example. Look at the one on the left, though. Here's a better example. So this individual made a bet. This was called a future wager. So what they did is in June of 2019, June 7th, before the college football season even started, they bet $50 that Joe Burrow, the quarterback from LSU, would win the Heisman Trophy, which is done in December each year, and it votes for college football's best football player. So this individual bet $50 to try to win $10,000. Those odds are 200 to 1. Well, wouldn't you know, Joe Burrow was in the final 5 for the Heisman Trophy. So now we're sitting here on December 7th, 6 months later, and on TV, Joe Burrow now has a 1 in 5 chance of being named the best college football player from the year. If he is, this individual wins $10,000. The website he made this wager on, he or she made this wager on, is offering $3,865. They will give this individual over almost $4,000 to close the bet out now. Would you do that? If you bet $50, would you take a guarantee of $3,865, or would you risk it? And if you're right and Joe Burrow wins the Heisman, you just won $10,000. If you're wrong, you just lost $50. That's all it is. It's a really interesting dynamic. I know I would take the guarantee of $3,865. I've talked to other people who said, I would just wait for the $10,000 because the most I can lose is $50. No big deal. So it's a real interesting dynamic. And here's the best way to think about it. Think of the show Deal or No Deal. Remember that show Deal or No Deal with Howie Mandel? Howie Mandel's right at this time. He washes his hands a lot, I'm glad he does, because he was talking about the coronavirus. I heard him the other day. Howie Mandel on that show was always wonderful. But the concept is the banker gives the offer, right? A person can stay on and keep pressing for more money, or they can take the banker's offer and end the game. Cash out is the same thing. And so what it gets someone to start thinking about, it actually starts thinking about your money management. See, cashing out almost makes you think about day trading or cashing out like you're in a stock market. You're locking in your profits. You're limiting your losses. It's no longer skill-based gambling. Instead, I'm a skillful money manager. You see how certain elements of gambling can change your perception or thoughts about the activity. It doesn't even feel like I'm gambling anymore. Now I'm just being smart with my money. So we have to be careful. Last slide here, psychosocial impact of sports gambling apps. This is Dr. Mark Griffiths, who does a lot of research in sports gambling. And he talked about wherever there's live sporting events, there will always be a wagering consumer. It's just the nature of gambling. There'll always be someone with an interest. In-play betting caters beautifully to the naturally occurring bettor, and it also grabs new clientele, people who may not have considered wagering in game, right? The reward schedule that we talked about goes from weekly to daily or even hourly. It changes how people watch and wager. The frequency and the speed of play becomes a concern. And then the gambling problems often arise out of the speed of the reward, the type of the reward, and the continuous reinforcement. Those 3 elements are all applying to in-play sports wagering. Robbie, let's go to question number 3, and then we'll close it up for the day.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Good stuff, man. Let's go to number 3. And it asks, early cash out feature to sports gambling was described as, there you go. A, the ability to go to the bank during the game. B, a new sport to bet on. Is it C, lets you close out your bet early based on a real-time offer? Or is it D, all the above? Early cash out feature to sports gambling was described as, is it A, the ability to go to the bank during the game? Is it B, a new sport to bet on? Is it C, lets you choose, lets you close out your bet early based on a real-time offer? Or D, all the above? And we've got about 65% who have voted, going to 70. Yeah, this was a great piece here, Dan. I really liked what you talked about here with the early cash out.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It
Fascinating,
really,
man.
yeah, it
Yeah.
really is. There's a lot, a lot going on in the world of sports gambling.
Yep. Okay. As we're answering, the correct answer is C. Lets you close out your bet early based on a real-time offer. We're at 84%. And as we're right at the hour. So if you've got just a couple of minutes, Dan, we've
Yes.
got quite a few, a few questions anyways. I do want to thank everybody for being on today. If you have to go, I understand. And if you also remember that Dan will be back to present on his next webinar it's going to be on a Friday, guys. So just so you know, and it will be May 15th, Internet Gaming, Esports, and Sports Gambling. Thank you for being on. And now we'll try to get to some questions.
Great. I'm going to put a whiteboard up real quick, Robbie, just with my email address and contact information.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And just so you know, I saw a lot of chats, folks, about, hey, can you go back a slide? Can you go forward? Listen, if you'd like the slides, you can either contact me or Dan here at his address, and we'll get you the slides. Also, remember too, I forgot to make this announcement. All these are being recorded and will be on the weknowthefeeling.org website under the For Providers tab. So with that being said, I know Marie had asked, and Marie, you might have asked me this or something. I'm sorry, but she's got a great question here. We've been corresponding via email, and she asked your opinion of the military using esports in the Army and Air Force and Navy. I don't know if you've read into that, Dan. Yeah.
Esports or video games, because I've seen the use, and there's some good studies that talks about the benefits of video gaming, and I do have that saved. I can forward that to Marie. Some of the benefits of video gaming is slow, say for older adults, slowing cognitive decline. Video gaming also tends to improve peripheral vision. It also helps improve executive functioning. So those are three areas where video gaming in and of itself can help. For virtual gaming, in terms of the technology that's available, I think they're great at using for kind of honing skills. One of the areas that's really come under fire, I guess, was just the development and the use of weapons in a game and normalizing people that experience. But in the military, the harsh reality is you have to almost get used to that experience. And if they can do it effectively and help improve someone's reaction time and improve their peripheral vision, I think there's a tremendous benefit to using that within that context. Yes, I'm all for it in that context. Yes.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Yeah. And Marie had asked me too, and I think she said something about, if I remember correctly, it came into recruiting. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll take a look
Is
at
my
it.
screen sharing, Robbie? Do you see my email address on there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm
Let
just
me
making
make
sure
sure.
everyone's
Yep.
okay.
Also, the question: do you know the status of sports betting or sports book betting in Illinois?
Oh boy, what is the status of sportsbook betting with COVID? I know it was coming to Illinois, and
Yep.
I can. You know what I can do? I can do that for the next webinar on the
Sure.
15th. I can get an update, but I do not have the latest update for Illinois. I know there was a couple of items being thrown around to be brick and mortar only. There was some discussion about a companion internet gambling bill,
Yep.
but nothing that I've seen concrete.
Yeah, no, a good question. And what I do know is the new casino. Now, this is pre-COVID, so this was back.
Yes.
I think at the end of last year, there was there's going to be 6 new casinos that are coming up in Illinois, and one of them is going up. It's a Hard Rock in Rockford. The last word I had pre-COVID, this was at the last of 2019, was you were going to be able to place a bet there. Now, I don't know, and this comes down to, and perhaps we could do a little bit of homework, but if the casino actually opened, I believe it did, and I believe they were going to be able to lay down a bet there. As far as being able to, if the trigger's been pulled on actual sports betting in Illinois, with the COVID, it's kind of put a twist on things.
Yeah.
But
I don't think it
yeah,
has. I think it's
yeah,
still, it was, as of my last check, it was riverboat, or casinos, a pari-mutuel horse, and, slot locations, parlors or lounges, whatever you want to call them. But the
right.
sports was on hold. Whoever asked that question, send me an email. I'm happy to get some information and share it with you.
Yep, good. Yeah. And that sounds pretty much in line with what we kind of knew too.
Yeah.
It was up in the air, but I think COVID-19 is, yeah.
Put a
And
pause on that.
who knows if that would have happened if it wouldn't have, been for this pandemic. So, okay.
Yeah.
And we got just maybe a couple other questions here. This is from Elizabeth. Do you have concerns about athletes who are unable to compete during COVID or even train at the intensity level to which they are accustomed, turning to online gambling, fantasy sports, esports at this time, just as a replacement, perhaps? And a good question, Elizabeth, due to the competitive nature of athletes.
Yeah, that is a great question. That is a concern. And one of the things that we lack during this time, Elizabeth, is data. I don't know how people are coping with COVID. And these are things that are going to come out in the months and years to come, in the sense of, what did you do during COVID? How did you cope? I know just from anecdotal stories. I talked to a good friend of mine who's ranked number 2 in the country in MMA and in his weight class, and he's struggling. He was a highly competitive athlete, and now he's gained about 22 pounds because he just got out of his rhythm. He's not a gambler, but he went over to food and started drinking. So yes, alcohol consumption, I think, is on the rise. I know
Yeah.
internet gambling is on the rise in the state of New Jersey. We're seeing the revenue numbers come in there. But from a finely tuned athlete who has that competitive streak, that personality of risk taking, of pushing themselves, right? Some of those personality characteristics or factors. When you can't do an activity, you're going to find something else to do. My hope and prayer is that they're not turning to gambling. The weather, thankfully, we're not in the dead of winter. We're turning into nicer weather, but keeping those skills up is a challenge, even for my 15-year-old son, who's a fairly competitive and accomplished high school athlete, being recruited in a couple of different areas. It's hard for him to get the motivation to go in the backyard and hit off a tee for an hour and a half. So it is a concern. I would love to have real-time data and surveys. The problem is as a nonprofit, we don't have the funding always for that, and especially now, other funding sources are limited. So it's a hard time to get the right answers, but I'll be curious.
Yeah, good stuff, Dan. Thank you very much. Yeah, and we had a question it was earlier, and Evelyn was asking about the 2 games for adolescents. She said she missed hearing them. I think it was right around the esports. I'm not sure what she 2 games for.
Well, I know the games that a lot of the adolescents are playing now, it could be any combination of Roblox, it could be Fortnite, it could be Call of Duty. Those are those are games, titles that a lot of adolescents play. The 2 companies that are putting on the fantasy sports contests are DraftKings and FanDuel. Those are 2 companies that are putting on a lot of the fantasy contests.
Yeah.
League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Global Offensive are the 2 games I mentioned as games that you can draft fantasy players on also for esports. So maybe it was League of Legends and Counter-Strike.
Yep. And Dan, I can't, and I'm going to let you go, but Tanya has a great question because I'm watching this. I'm being selfish on this one because I want to hear your point. And we'll close with this question. With the documentary on ESPN on Sunday nights, and remember, this is for the great state of Illinois, and a lot of clinicians from Chicago are in with us today, and some great Bulls fans. So she asked, after watching The Last Dance, and I don't know if you're watching it or not, Dan, but she said, and I picked up on this too. I think that most players have already turned to online betting. Did you get the feeling that Michael Jordan didn't want to admit to a gambling addiction? I think it was episode 6 or 5. They touch on his gambling. I'm sure there's 4 more 1-hour episodes left. I'm sure they're going to delve into it a little bit further, but he just kind of brushed it off. Especially the time that he was found when he was playing the Knicks years ago in the playoffs. It was the night before. It might have been the night before one of the games. He and his dad were at a at a casino in Jersey there. But anyways, I don't know if you saw that, but he didn't really touch on it, and I didn't know if you had a viewpoint on that.
So I haven't seen it yet. So I know it's going on, and I want to see it, but because I've missed the first 2 episodes, just because I had other things I was doing with my children, I said, let me just wait. I'll catch them all at one time. I'll binge them on a weekend or whatever it might be. What I will, though, I do have enough knowledge and background of Michael Jordan and his career to know that if you're a professional sports athlete, you better be pretty damn careful about admitting to gambling, because we know what happened with Pete Rose, and we understand Charles Barkley, and you know Michael Jordan. All of a sudden, if you're a professional athlete and it's perceived that you have a gambling problem, the next logical conclusion a person will make, oh, how are you involved in fixing the game? You might have some bookmakers that approach an individual, maybe not of Michael Jordan's caliber, because the guy's worth a hell of a lot of money, but you get some other athletes who can influence the outcome of a game. Now, all of a sudden, you're really opening yourself up to the integrity issue, the integrity of the sport. Also, gambling, if you say that you have a gambling problem, you're under the microscope. People will now, every time they see you doing the slightest thing, they're going to question whether or not you should be doing that, whether you should be gambling. Plus, gambling is something that people do who are also very competitive. Michael Jordan, one of the most competitive athletes ever. And his gambling edge, if he stopped gambling, that may have taken away an edge that he had to succeed. The reason I say that is I think about Tiger Woods, also a process addiction, when he admitted to having a sex addiction. Mm-hmm. He not only did he have injury, but you have to wonder, when someone with an addiction, there are certain personality traits that lend itself to addiction. And a lot of times it's risk-taking, it's compulsivity, it's, stretching the boundaries. And when that disappears, does an individual then lose their edge to some degree? And I've always wondered this, and there's arguments for it. So there's a lot going on in that question, and I can see why Michael would never want to admit to that, especially during the time.
Yeah. Well, great answer. Yeah, and I kind of picked up on that too, and I agree. By the way, with the edge thing, it's almost an adrenaline that comes out of it too. But with this addiction, it kills folks, and I know you know that too. And then, and even with substances, sometimes people have to make choices, right, to live. I won't go down that path too far, right? But anyways. Dan, it was great as always, man. And I look forward to the next one. So
awesome
thank you very much. And thank you for everybody who logged in. And again, this will be recorded. Recorded version will be on weknowthefeeling.org. And then also we look forward to hearing from everybody on Friday, May 15th, where Dan will continue his talk on sports gambling, but also he's going to incorporate more on esports and internet gaming. Everybody have a great day. And thank you.
Great. Thanks Dan. All. Be safe.
Great job, Dan. All right, man.
Thanks.
See you.
Later. Bye-bye.